The sound of drums and firecrackers echoed through the small village in rural Runaway, China. Red banners hung across bamboo poles, and paper lanterns swayed gently in the summer breeze. On this day, Mei Lin was supposed to be the happiest girl in the village. She was the bride, the center of the celebration. Yet, inside the bridal chamber, her heart was pounding not with joy, but with dread. She sat in front of the old wooden mirror, her face painted with light makeup, a red veil folded neatly beside her. Around her, relatives and neighbors bustled, admiring her embroidered silk dress. "You're so lucky, Mei Lin," one aunt gushed, "to marry into the Chen family. Your future will be secure." Another woman whispered, "Even if he is older, at least you'll never starve." Their voices felt like knives in her chest. Her husband-to-be, Chen Wei, was almost twice her age. A wealthy but cruel businessman who had bought her hand in marriage from her struggling father. Mei Lin's family farm was deep in debt after a failed harvest and her father's illness. To them, this marriage was salvation. But to Mei Lin, it was a prison. Her delicate fingers trembled as she touched the red veil. The color symbolized joy and good fortune, yet it felt suffocating, like a shroud. Tears burned in her eyes, but she blinked them away. She couldn't let herself break down now, not when every second mattered. She remembered the words her younger brother had whispered to her last night when everyone else was asleep. "Sister, if you don't want this, run. I'll cover for you." "Run where?" she had asked, trembling. "Anywhere, as long as you're far from here." The thought had haunted her through the night. And now, with the wedding just moments away, the decision crystallized in her heart. She would not, sacrifice her life for her family's debts. When the women stepped outside to fetch the groom's entourage, Mei Lin seized her chance. She grabbed a small cloth bag hidden beneath the bed. Inside, only a few coins and a change of clothes. Heart hammering, she pushed open the wooden window. The late afternoon sun hit her face as she climbed out, the hem of her heavy dress snagging on the sill. She tore it free, ignoring the ripping sound, and dropped onto the dirt path below. "Mei Lin, are you?" A cousin's voice called faintly from inside. Panic surged through her. Without a second thought, she ran. Her red dress trailed behind her like a flame as she dashed past rice paddies and down narrow lanes, startling chickens and children who stared at her in confusion. Her sandals slapped against the dusty ground, the coins in her bag jingling with every step. Somewhere behind her, a voice shouted, "The bride! The bride is gone!" Gongs and firecrackers were replaced by chaos. Men shouted, villagers gasped, and soon, footsteps thundered after her. Mei Lin's lungs burned, her legs trembling, but she pushed harder. Her only thought was freedom. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to reach the main road, the bus stop, the train station, anywhere that would take her far away from Chen Wei's grasp. She cut through a small bamboo grove, branches scratching her skin. Her dress snagged again, slowing her down. She stopped only long enough to rip off the heavy skirt, leaving her in a simpler underlayer of plain fabric, easier to move in. She stuffed the torn silk into her bag and kept running. At last, she stumbled onto the paved road leading out of the village. In the distance, she could see a bus idling at the stop, its engine rumbling, ready to depart. She sprinted, praying silently. "Wait!" she cried, waving desperately. The driver glanced at her with annoyance, but, seeing her flushed face and wild eyes, hesitated just long enough for her to leap onto the step. She thrust a few crumpled bills into his hand and collapsed onto a seat at the back. The bus door slammed shut, and the vehicle lurched forward, leaving behind shouts of angry men who had just reached the roadside too late. Mei Lin clutched the window frame, gasping for air. The village grew smaller and smaller behind her until it disappeared entirely, swallowed by fields and mountains. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. She was free, for now. But fear gnawed at her. She had nowhere to go. No plan, no friends in the city, no family she could rely on. Chen Wei was wealthy, powerful. If he wanted, he could send men to hunt her down. And her father? How furious would he be when he discovered she had ruined their salvation? The bus rattled toward the nearest city, its neon lights beginning to glow in the dusk. Mei Lin wiped her tears and forced herself to breathe deeply. She told herself she had made the right choice. She would rather face an uncertain future than a lifetime of misery. Hours later, the bus rolled into Nanjing. The city dazzled her with its size, its noise, its towering buildings lit like jewels against the night sky. Mei Lin stepped off the bus clutching her little bag, feeling utterly lost in the sea of strangers. She had never left her village before. The air smelled of exhaust and fried street food, so different from the earthy scent of rice paddies. As she wandered the crowded streets, her exhaustion caught up to her. Her legs wobbled, her vision blurred. She hadn't eaten since morning. The few coins she carried were barely enough for a cheap bun, which she devoured hungrily at a roadside stall. Night deepened, and with nowhere to go, Mei Lin curled up in the corner of a deserted alley. The sounds of the city buzzed around her, but she felt like a ghost, invisible among the rushing crowd. She hugged her bag to her chest, shivering in the humid summer air. "Tomorrow," she whispered to herself. "Tomorrow, I'll find work. I'll start over." But as her eyes fluttered shut, she didn't notice the pair of sharp, observant eyes watching her from the window of a black luxury car parked at the end of the street. Inside the sleek vehicle, a man leaned back in his seat, his expression unreadable. He had been on his way to a late meeting when his gaze had caught the sight of the disheveled young woman in bridal underclothes crouched in the alley, looking like a broken porcelain doll. "Interesting," he murmured, his deep voice carrying an edge of intrigue. His driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "Sir." The man's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Nothing. Just drive." But his eyes lingered on the fragile figure of Mei Lin as the car pulled away. A spark of curiosity ignited within him. Little did Mei Lin know, her desperate escape had already drawn the attention of a stranger, a man whose world was far more dangerous, far more powerful than anything she had ever imagined. The morning sun filtered through the cracks of the buildings, its warmth brushing against Mei Lin's face. She stirred awake, her body stiff from sleeping on the cold pavement. Her dress was wrinkled, her hair tangled, and her small bag clutched tightly to her chest as if it were her last anchor to life. The city had already come alive. Vendors were setting up stalls, the sound of bicycle bells echoed through the streets, and people in business suits hurried past without sparing her a glance. Mei Lin pulled her knees closer, feeling the sting of humiliation. She was a runaway bride, nameless and faceless in a city that didn't care whether she lived or starved. Her stomach growled, loud and painful. She reached into her bag, counting the few coins left. Barely enough for another steamed bun. If she wasn't careful, she'd have nothing by tonight. She stood shakily, brushing dust from her dress, and began walking aimlessly down the street. Perhaps she could find work as a waitress or dishwasher. Anything, as long as it allowed her to survive. But fate had other plans. At the corner of a busy intersection, a sleek black car pulled up. Its tinted windows reflected the bustling street, but Mei Lin felt a prickle at the back of her neck, as if someone inside was watching her. The rear window slid down with a quiet hum. Inside, she glimpsed a man in a sharp tailored suit. His presence radiated authority, his dark eyes assessing her with an intensity that made her heart stumble. He looked like someone far removed from her world, wealth, power, and cold elegance wrapped in human form. "Miss," his voice was deep, smooth, and commanding. "Are you lost?" Mei Lin froze, clutching her bag. She didn't know whether to answer or run. In her village, her father always said, never talk to strangers in the city. They'll trick you, use you, swallow you whole. Yet something about this man was different. He wasn't leering at her like some of the passers-by had. His gaze was sharp but not vulgar, curious but not mocking. She swallowed hard, lowering her eyes. "I'm fine. Fine." His lips twitched into the faintest smirk. "You're standing in yesterday's bridal dress, in the middle of Nanjing, with a face that screams you haven't eaten properly in days. That doesn't look fine to me." Her cheeks flushed with shame. She instinctively hugged her bag tighter, ready to retreat. "I said I'm fine. Please, leave me alone." The man studied her, then gestured to the driver. The car door swung open. "Get in." Mei Lin's eyes widened in alarm. "What? No. You have two choices," he said calmly, his gaze locking onto hers. "Keep wandering the streets until someone less civil than me decides to take advantage of you. Or, take a leap of faith and get in this car. I don't bite." She hesitated, torn between fear and desperation. Every instinct screamed at her to distrust him, but the gnawing hunger in her belly and the exhaustion in her body whispered otherwise. Her silence stretched, the man arching a brow as if testing her courage. Finally, Mei Lin bit her lip, tightened her grip on her bag, and stepped inside. The leather seat was soft, the air scented with expensive cologne. She felt like an imposter, a ragged bird in a cage of gold. The man leaned back, studying her as the car glided back into traffic. "What's your name?" "Mei Lin." "Mei Lin," he repeated slowly, as if testing the taste of it. "Pretty. Fitting." She glanced at him warily. "And you?" "Liang Shen," he said simply, his tone carrying weight, as though anyone in the city should already know it. The name stirred faint recognition. Mei Lin had heard it whispered even in her village. The billionaire CEO of Liang Group, one of the most powerful business empires in China. But surely, this couldn't be him. Why would someone like that speak to her? Her silence seemed to amuse him. "Judging from your expression, you've heard of me." "I?" She looked down quickly. "Yes, maybe. A little." Liang Shen chuckled lowly. "Relax. I'm not here to scare you. But I am curious. Brides don't usually wander the streets alone after their wedding day. Care to explain?" His words pierced her chest like arrows. Mei Lin's lips trembled. Should she tell him the truth? That she had run away from a marriage arranged by her family, sold like livestock to an older man? No. If she confessed, he might mock her, or worse, return her to Chenwei for a reward. She forced a shaky smile. "I got lost." Liang Shen tilted his head, clearly unconvinced. But instead of pressing further, he let it slide. "Very well. Everyone has their secrets. For now, you need food. And a place to rest." Before she could protest, the car pulled into the driveway of an upscale restaurant. Mei Lin stiffened, panic rising. "No, wait. I can't go in there. I don't belong in a place like this." "Nonsense." Liang Shen stepped out, his tall frame casting a commanding shadow. He opened the door for her, his gaze steady. "Come." Every instinct told her to refuse, to run, but her legs betrayed her, following him inside. The restaurant was elegant, filled with chandeliers and polished marble floors. The hostess nearly bowed when she saw Liang Shen. "Mr. Liang, your private suite is ready." Mei Lin's jaw dropped slightly. So it was true. He really was that Liang Shen. Inside the suite, waiters brought dishes one after another. Steamed fish, roasted duck, dumplings, fragrant rice. Mei Lin's stomach growled embarrassingly loud. She lowered her head, cheeks burning. Liang Shen's lips curved faintly. "Eat." I can't," she whispered. "This is too expensive. I can't repay." "I didn't ask for repayment," he interrupted smoothly. "Eat." For a long moment, Mei Lin sat frozen. Then, hunger won. She picked up her chopsticks and began eating cautiously, each bite filling the hollow ache in her stomach. Soon, she was eating faster, almost desperately, until she realized Liang Shen was watching her with an unreadable expression. Her chopsticks stilled. Sorry. I must look like a beggar." "You look like someone who hasn't been treated kindly in a long time," he said softly, almost to himself. Her heart skipped a beat. His words were simple, but they struck deep, unraveling the walls she had tried to build around herself. For the first time since running away, Mei Lin felt seen. When the meal ended, Liang Shen leaned back, sipping his tea. His eyes never left her. "You need shelter. I can offer that." Mei Lin shook her head quickly. "No, I can't accept. You've already done too much. I'll find work. I'll manage." "You'll end up in the streets again," he said bluntly. "Do you have money for rent? For food? For safety?" Her silence was answer enough. Liang Shen set his cup down with quiet finality. "You can stay at one of my properties. Consider it a temporary arrangement until you decide what you want to do next." She stared at him, overwhelmed. Why was he helping her? What did he want in return? As if reading her thoughts, Liang Shen's lips curved into a faint smile. "Relax, Mei Lin. I don't need anything from you. At least, not yet. The way he said it sent a shiver down her spine, half reassurance, half warning. And though her heart told her not to trust him, her weary body whispered otherwise. For the first time, Mei Lin realized her fate had shifted again. She had run away from one cage, only to stumble into the orbit of a far more dangerous man. The small cabin on the edge of the forest was nothing like Emily had imagined a safe haven would be. The wooden structure leaned slightly to one side, its roof patched in places with tin sheets that groaned against the wind. The windows were cracked, the floorboards creaked with every step, and the faint smell of old firewood lingered in the air. But to her, after the chaos of the wedding and the terrifying escape, it felt like paradise. "You'll be safe here," Alexander said as he set the kettle on the ancient stove. His movements were calm, almost calculated, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. Emily sat at the edge of the single bed in the cabin, her wedding dress still in disarray, stained with dirt and torn at the hem from running through the woods. She hugged herself, her eyes never leaving the man who had saved her. "I still don't understand why you're helping me," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but there was a spark of curiosity in it too. Alexander turned, meeting her gaze. His eyes, those dark, unreadable eyes, held secrets she couldn't begin to unravel. "Because you needed someone, and I happened to be there." "That's not an answer," Emily said, shaking her head. "People don't just risk themselves for strangers." A faint smirk curved his lips. "Maybe I'm not like most people." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire he had started in the stove. Emily looked around, trying to distract herself from the growing intensity of his presence. The cabin had only one bed, a tiny table with 2 chairs, and shelves stacked with old, dusty books. Her eyes returned to him. He didn't fit this place. His posture, his clothes, even though simple, spoke of refinement. Everything about him screamed out of place, like he belonged in a skyscraper, not in a run-down cabin hidden in the woods. "You're not a farmer or a woodsman," she said softly, narrowing her eyes. "Who are you, really?" Alexander paused, his hand gripping the handle of the kettle. For a moment, his jaw tightened, and Emily thought she had touched a nerve. But then he chuckled lightly and poured hot water into 2 chipped mugs. "Drink," he said, handing her one. "You'll need your strength." She accepted the mug, wrapping her cold fingers around it. The heat seeped into her skin, and she took a cautious sip. It was nothing more than weak tea, but it felt like the most comforting drink she'd ever had. After a while, Emily's shoulders began to relax. The fear of being chased, the humiliation of her ruined wedding, and the exhaustion from running caught up to her. She leaned back against the wall, closing her eyes. Alexander watched her quietly. Her messy hair fell in loose waves around her face, her cheeks flushed from the cold and from everything she had endured. There was a fragility about her, but also a surprising strength, the way she had run, the way she spoke despite her fear. "You're strong," he said suddenly. Emily's eyes opened, startled. "What?" "You ran from something most people would accept," Alexander explained, his voice low and steady. "It takes courage to defy an entire family, to walk away from a life that's been forced on you." Her lips parted, as if she wanted to protest, but then she closed them again. No one had ever told her she was strong. To everyone else, her parents, her relatives, even the villagers, she was just a pawn, a quiet girl who should obey. "I didn't feel strong," she admitted. "I felt desperate, like I couldn't breathe anymore." Alexander leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Desperation makes people reckless, but sometimes it also makes them free. Emily stared at him, studying him in the dim light of the cabin. His words carried weight, as though he spoke from experience. She wondered what kind of life he had lived, what demons he carried that made him hide away in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. "Why are you here?" she asked again, softer this time. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood and placed more wood in the stove, watching the flames rise. "Some places are meant to be hidden," he finally said. "Sometimes people come here to disappear." The cryptic reply only deepened her curiosity. She opened her mouth to press further, but his sudden movement stopped her. Alexander had moved to the window, his sharp gaze scanning the shadows outside. Emily tensed. "What is it?" "Nothing," he said, though his tone was far too alert. "Just the wind." But Emily wasn't convinced. The way his body stiffened, the way his eyes darted across the darkness, it wasn't the reaction of someone unconcerned. She placed her mug down and stood, clutching the torn fabric of her dress. "Are they looking for me? Do you think my family—" Alexander turned back to her, his expression softer now. "Don't worry. They won't find you tonight. Not here." "Tonight," she repeated, catching the subtle warning in his words. "What about tomorrow? What happens then?" He walked closer, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. Emily felt her pulse quicken as his eyes locked onto hers. There was something magnetic in the way he looked at her, something that drew her in despite the storm of fear and uncertainty raging inside her. "Tomorrow," Alexander said slowly, "we'll decide." The words sent a shiver down her spine. He spoke as if her fate was now tied to his. For the first time that night, Emily realized the danger wasn't just from the people chasing her, it was also from the stranger standing before her. He was her savior, yes, but he was also a man wrapped in mystery, one who made her heart race in ways she couldn't explain. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, Emily lay on the bed while Alexander remained seated in the chair, watching the flames. The distance between them was small, but the tension was immense, charged with questions left unspoken. And though she told herself to stay wary, part of her couldn't help but feel safe in his presence. A dangerous shelter, indeed. The morning light crept through the cracked window, turning the dust motes in the cabin into tiny sparks floating in the air. Emily stirred on the bed, her body aching from exhaustion and the stiffness of sleeping in her ruined wedding dress. For a moment, she almost forgot where she was. But then she saw him. Alexander sat by the table, already awake, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. He had a piece of paper in front of him, scribbling something with a fountain pen that looked far too expensive for a man hiding out in a shabby cabin. Emily blinked, pushing herself upright. "You're awake early." He didn't look up. "I don't sleep much." His voice carried the same calm authority as before, but in the daylight, Emily noticed details she had missed. His shirt, though simple, was made of fine fabric. His wristwatch, peeking out from beneath his sleeve, gleamed with understated luxury. His mannerisms were precise, practiced, like someone who was used to being obeyed. "He doesn't belong here," she thought again. "Do you live here?" she asked cautiously. Alexander finally lifted his gaze to meet hers. For a heartbeat, she felt pinned by the intensity of his eyes. "No. This is just a place I use when I need to disappear." Emily swallowed. The way he said it, as if disappearing was a normal part of his life, only made her curiosity burn hotter. "You talk like you're hiding from something," she said, her voice quieter now. "Maybe I am." He stood, folding the paper neatly and sliding it into his jacket pocket. His movements were deliberate, controlled. "But you don't need to worry about that." Emily frowned. "How can I not worry? You saved me. You brought me here. And now I'm stuck with you." Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, perhaps. "Stuck with me?" "Yes," she shot back, frustration bubbling through her exhaustion. "I don't even know your last name. I don't know why you were in the woods last night. I don't know why you keep acting like some mysterious hero who shows up out of nowhere. Who are you?" The air between them grew taut. For the first time, Alexander seemed unsettled. He exhaled slowly, walking to the window, his broad shoulders framed by the morning light. "Do you really want to know?" he asked, his voice low, almost dangerous. Emily's heart thudded, but she nodded. "Yes." He turned back to her, and in that moment, the mask slipped. "My name is Alexander Blackwood." The name sent a jolt through her. She didn't know much about the world beyond her small village, but even she had heard of that name. Alexander Blackwood, the elusive billionaire, the CEO of Blackwood Enterprises, a man who rarely appeared in public but whose empire touched everything from technology to finance. Newspapers called him ruthless. Business magazines painted him as untouchable. Emily's lips parted in disbelief. You're lying." "I don't lie," Alexander said firmly. His gaze didn't waver. She shook her head, overwhelmed. "But why? Why would someone like you be in the woods? In a cabin like this? Saving me? A shadow crossed his face, the kind that spoke of burdens too heavy to share. Because sometimes even men with everything need to disappear. And last night, when I disappeared, I happened to find you. Emily stared at him, her mind racing. She should have felt terrified, being alone in the woods with a man who wielded that much power. But instead, she felt something else, a strange, undeniable pull. Still, her distrust surfaced. If you're really Alexander Blackwood, then you're dangerous. Men like you, they don't do things for free. What do you want from me? His eyes narrowed, and he stepped closer. Emily instinctively backed against the wall, her pulse quickening. You think I'm here to trap you? He asked quietly, almost harshly. That saving you was some kind of bargain? Emily swallowed hard, her voice trembling. Isn't it? People don't just help others without expecting something back. Especially men like you. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Alexander leaned closer, his face inches from hers. His eyes burned with something she couldn't decipher. Anger, yes, but also something deeper. I don't want anything from you, he said, his voice fierce. Not your gratitude, not your fear, not your obedience. The only thing I want, he paused, his breath warm against her skin, is to know why you looked at me last night as if you trusted me when you didn't even know my name. Emily's breath caught. She couldn't answer, because she didn't know herself. Something about him had made her leap into his arms when she could have run in the opposite direction. Something about him still made her heartbeat stumble now. Her silence was answer enough. Alexander straightened, pulling back, though his jaw was still tight. You're right about one thing, he said. I am dangerous, but not to you. Emily pressed her hand against the wall, steadying herself as she whispered, Then who are you dangerous to? Alexander didn't reply. Instead, he opened the cabin door, letting in a rush of cold morning air. Come, he said. If we stay here, they'll find you eventually. You need to leave this place. Her stomach dropped. Leave? To where? His dark gaze flickered to her, and for the first time, Emily caught something almost vulnerable beneath the steel. With me. The words hit her like a stone in the chest. Leaving with him meant stepping into a world she couldn't comprehend, a world of wealth, power, and shadows. But staying here meant being dragged back to the life she had just fled. It was a choice between danger and despair. And as she stared at Alexander Blackwood, the stranger who wasn't a stranger anymore, Emily realized she was already leaning toward the danger. The car glided smoothly through the city, its tinted windows shutting out the noise of the bustling streets. Emily sat stiffly in the back seat, clutching the fabric of her plain dress, her heart racing with every passing moment. It had been hours since she agreed, reluctantly, breathlessly, to follow Alexander. She still wasn't sure if she'd made the right decision. Now, staring out at skyscrapers stabbing the clouds, Emily felt like she had been dropped into another universe. She had grown up surrounded by rolling hills, wheat fields, and dirt roads. But here, everything gleamed, glass, steel, neon lights. The city thrummed with power. And at the center of it all sat the man beside her. Alexander leaned back in the leather seat, one hand resting on his knee, the other scrolling through his phone. His expression was unreadable, his posture radiating authority even in silence. Emily swallowed nervously. What have I gotten myself into? The car slowed as they entered a private underground entrance. Guards in black suits nodded respectfully as the vehicle passed. Emily's anxiety grew. Finally, the door opened, and a man in uniform bowed slightly. Welcome back, Mr. Blackwood. Emily froze. Everyone here knew who he was. They didn't even flinch at his presence. Alexander stepped out first, then extended a hand toward her. Emily. She hesitated, but his gaze left her no room for refusal. With trembling fingers, she placed her hand in his. His grip was steady, grounding. The moment her feet touched the marble floor, her breath caught. It was a lobby unlike anything she had ever imagined. A chandelier glittered overhead like a constellation of stars. Walls of polished stone reflected the golden light. Men and women in designer suits moved briskly, their eyes occasionally flicking toward Alexander, but never too directly. Emily, in her simple dress and worn shoes, felt as though every glance was a blade cutting into her. She tried to shrink into herself, wishing she could vanish. "Don't slouch," Alexander murmured beside her, his tone low but commanding. "Stand tall." Her cheeks heated. "I don't belong here." He looked at her sharply. "You do, because you're with me." The words shouldn't have meant anything, but her heart gave a foolish leap anyway. They entered the private elevator, its doors closing them into a silence broken only by the soft hum of ascent. Emily pressed her palms together, desperate to keep them from trembling. "Where are you taking me?" she finally asked. "My world," Alexander replied simply. Her chest tightened. "And if I don't fit into it?" His gaze met hers, dark and unflinching. "Then I'll make sure you do." The elevator dinged softly, and the doors slid open. Emily gasped. They were in a penthouse that looked like something out of a dream. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the room, offering a sweeping view of the glittering city below. Sleek furniture in muted tones filled the space, accented by works of art that probably cost more than her entire village. The air smelled faintly of leather, wood, and something sharper, like power itself. She took an uncertain step inside, her shoes sinking into the thick carpet. This is your home." "One of them," Alexander answered casually, removing his jacket and handing it to a waiting staff member. "This is where you'll stay." Emily spun toward him, eyes wide. "Stay? I can't stay here." "Yes, you can." His tone left no room for debate. "It's safe. No one will dare touch you here." She clenched her fists. "You talk as if I'm your prisoner." He paused, studying her, then stepped closer. His presence was overwhelming, his height, his intensity, the weight of his gaze. "You're not my prisoner," he said softly, firmly. "But you are in danger. Whoever wanted to force you into that marriage will not stop looking for you. Here, you're untouchable." Emily's throat tightened. A part of her wanted to believe him. Another part resisted fiercely. "Why are you doing this, Alexander? Why me?" For once, his mask slipped. His jaw clenched, and his eyes darkened. "Because the moment I saw you," he said slowly, "I saw something I've been searching for my entire life. Innocence. Honesty. A heart that isn't corrupted by power." Emily's breath caught. She didn't know how to respond. Before she could, a sharp knock at the door broke the moment. "Mr. Blackwood," a voice called from outside. "The board members are waiting." Alexander's expression hardened instantly, his commanding mask sliding back into place. "Tell them I'll be there shortly." "Yes, sir." The footsteps retreated. Emily looked at him, bewildered. "Board members." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "Welcome to the Lion's Den, Emily. This is where people try to bite, even when they're smiling." Her stomach twisted. She didn't understand this world, but she could feel its sharpness, its hunger. Alexander reached for her hand, and though she stiffened, he didn't let go. "Stay here. Don't wander. This place is safe, but the people in it, not all of them are trustworthy." Emily lifted her chin, defiance flashing in her eyes. "And are you trustworthy, Alexander?" His lips curved, but it wasn't a smile, it was something darker. "That depends. Do you trust me?" Her heart skipped. She didn't answer. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a murmur that sent shivers down her spine. "Then learn how to." And with that, he released her hand and walked toward the door, leaving her alone in the vast, glittering cage of his world. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the city lights outside. "The Lion's Den," she thought. "And I just followed the lion inside." The penthouse was too silent. Emily sat curled on the edge of a white leather sofa, her fingers twisting together in her lap. The city lights stretched endlessly before her, dazzling, untouchable. She had expected to feel safe here, but instead, she felt like a sparrow trapped in a glass cage. Her mind kept circling the same questions. Why me? Why did Alexander help me? And why bring me here, of all places? The faint click of the door startled her. She straightened, expecting Alexander to return. But it wasn't him. A tall woman swept into the room, heels clicking against the marble floor. She was stunning, sharp cheekbones, crimson lips, hair sleek and glossy like a raven's wing. Every inch of her screamed sophistication, danger, and control. The woman's eyes landed on Emily, and her perfectly sculpted brow arched. Well, well. So it's true. Emily rose quickly, uneasy. I'm sorry. Who are you? The woman smiled, but it wasn't kind. Isn't it polite to introduce yourself first, darling? You're standing in Alexander Blackwood's penthouse, after all. A place no ordinary girl should be. Emily's stomach tightened. She knows. I'm Emily, she said cautiously. The woman stepped closer, her heels echoing like a predator's steps. Emily. How quaint. My name is Victoria Hayes. Emily blinked. The name meant nothing to her, but Victoria seemed to expect recognition. You've never heard of me? She asked, feigning surprise. I was Alexander's fiancée. Emily's heart lurched. Fiancé. Victoria's smile widened at Emily's reaction. Ah, so he hasn't told you. How curious. We were engaged until a few months ago. Our families are old allies, bound by business and legacy. It was a perfect match, on paper. Her eyes gleamed with malice. Until Alexander decided he wanted something else. Or rather, someone else. Emily shook her head. You're mistaken. I'm not with him. He just... Victoria's laugh cut her off. Please. Do you think anyone will believe that? You're here, in his home. He doesn't let anyone here. Even during our engagement, I never lived in this penthouse. Emily flinched, her face burning. She wanted to argue, to say she didn't belong here, that it was all a mistake, but the words tangled in her throat. Victoria leaned in, her perfume sharp and suffocating. You're nothing more than a distraction. A fragile little flower from the countryside. Do you honestly think Alexander Blackwood would risk his empire for someone like you? Emily clenched her fists. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't want to be here. Then leave, Victoria hissed, her voice dropping its sweetness. Pack your things and disappear before he grows bored of you. Because trust me, darling, he will. Men like him always do. Emily's chest tightened painfully. Doubts crept in like shadows. Was Victoria right? But before she could answer, the door opened again. Alexander entered, his expression instantly darkening at the sight before him. His eyes flicked to Victoria, then to Emily. Victoria, he said coldly, what are you doing here? Victoria turned to him, her demeanor shifting instantly back to elegance. Darling, I was simply visiting. I heard rumors you brought company. I had to see for myself. This is not your concern, Alexander said, his tone sharp. Victoria's smile sharpened. Oh, but it is. The board will want to know why the great Alexander Blackwood is hiding a girl in his penthouse. They already question your judgment. Shall I tell them? Emily froze, horror crashing over her. Alexander's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, placing himself between Emily and Victoria. You will tell them nothing. Victoria's laugh was low, dangerous, always so commanding. But tell me, Alexander, how long do you think you can protect her? When the vultures start circling, will you choose her or your empire? Emily's breath caught. Her heart twisted painfully at the unspoken threat. Get out. Alexander's voice was steel. Victoria tilted her head, her crimson lips curving. Very well. But remember, darling, I don't like losing. Not to anyone. She turned sharply, her heels clicking as she swept out of the penthouse. The door closed, leaving heavy silence behind. Emily stood frozen, her pulse racing, Victoria's poisonous words still echoing in her mind. Alexander turned to her. Did she say anything to you? Emily looked down at her hands, which trembled. She said you were engaged. Alexander's expression hardened. It was arranged. A business deal, nothing more. I ended it. But she said the board. Emily's voice cracked. Alexander, I don't belong here. I don't understand your world. People like her, people like you, they'll destroy me. He crossed the room in 2 strides, his hand cupping her chin, forcing her to look up at him. His eyes were fierce, unyielding. "They won't touch you. Not as long as I'm here." Her heart pounded. "But why? Why are you risking so much for me?" For a moment, something raw flickered in his gaze. Vulnerability, maybe even longing. "Because I don't care about the board. I don't care about Victoria. I care about you." Emily's breath caught, her eyes searching his. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him. But Victoria's words had planted seeds of doubt that refused to die. "Alexander," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I don't know if I can survive in your world." His grip softened, his thumb brushing her cheek. "Then let me teach you. Stand beside me, Emily. Trust me." The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken fears and dangerous promises. Emily closed her eyes, torn between the warmth of his words and the venom of Victoria's. "Do I trust the lion who pulled me from the fire, or fear the cage he's leading me into?" The next morning, Emily awoke to the sound of muffled voices drifting through the penthouse. For a moment, she thought she was still dreaming, but the sharp, clipped tones told her otherwise. She slipped quietly out of bed, padding down the hallway until the voices grew clearer. Alexander was in the living room, standing in front of the massive windows, his phone pressed to his ear. The early sunlight poured over him, turning his figure into a striking silhouette against the skyline. "Yes, I've heard the rumors." His voice was cold, controlled. "No, they're not true. My personal life is not the board's concern. What matters is the company's stability." Emily froze. The board. Victoria must have already stirred the waters. Her stomach sank as she realized her presence was already shaking the empire Alexander had built. Alexander ended the call with a sharp flick of his wrist, tossing the phone onto the sofa. For a moment, his mask cracked, his shoulders sagged, his hand pressed against his forehead. He looked tired. Human. Emily hesitated, then stepped into the room. "Alexander." He turned quickly, his usual steel mask snapping back into place. But his eyes softened when they landed on her. "Did I wake you?" She shook her head. "No, but I heard." His jaw tightened. "The board is restless. Victoria's been feeding them poison. They want explanations, assurances." Emily lowered her gaze. "And I'm the problem." "You're not the problem," he said sharply. "They are. They see me as a puppet who should follow tradition and alliances. But I refuse to be controlled." Her heart ached at the fire in his voice. Yet doubts gnawed at her. "Alexander, I'm no one. A girl who ran from her own wedding. Why risk everything for me?" He moved closer, each step deliberate. "Because for once in my life, I'm not thinking about the empire. I'm thinking about what I want. And what I want is you." Emily's breath caught. The sincerity in his eyes stripped away his cold mask, leaving only raw honesty. But fear still clung to her. "And if they force you to choose, me or your company?" The question hung between them like a blade. For the first time, Alexander didn't answer immediately. His silence was heavy, his eyes shadowed. Emily's heart cracked. He doesn't know. Maybe he can't choose. Before either could speak again, the elevator chimed. A man in a gray suit stepped out, tall, slick, exuding authority. His eyes were sharp, assessing. "Alexander," the man greeted coolly. "I let myself in. We need to talk." Emily stiffened. "Not now, Marcus," Alexander said flatly. Marcus's gaze flicked to Emily, lingering with disdain. "So it's true. The girl exists." Emily flushed under his scrutiny. Marcus smirked. "You've changed, Alexander. A runaway bride from nowhere, paraded around like a trophy? The board will eat you alive." "Careful," Alexander warned, his tone icy. But Marcus only leaned casually against the sofa. "You know what they're saying already, don't you? That you've lost your edge. That you're distracted. That you're weak." Emily's chest tightened. Alexander's voice dropped into a lethal calm. "Get out." Marcus straightened, eyes glinting with mockery. "I'm on your side, Alex. Always have been." But if you want to survive in this world, you'd better decide whether you're a king or a fool blinded by love." His words lingered like poison as he strode back into the elevator, leaving behind a suffocating silence. Emily felt small, fragile, caught in the storm of Alexander's world. She turned to him, her voice breaking. "He's right. They'll destroy you because of me." "No," Alexander said firmly, stepping closer. His hands cupped her face, his gaze burning into hers. "They'll try, but I won't let them. I've worn their masks long enough, cold, ruthless, untouchable. With you, I don't have to pretend." Her breath shuddered. "And what if I'm not strong enough to face it all?" He leaned in, his forehead brushing hers. "Then lean on me. I'll carry the weight." Tears pricked her eyes. "Why me?" she whispered. His lips curved faintly, a rare softness breaking through his armor. "Because you're the only one who ever saw me. Not the CEO. Not the billionaire. Just a man standing in the rain, rescuing a girl who refused to give up." Emily's heart twisted, overwhelmed by the intensity of his words. For a moment, the walls of fear and doubt crumbled, and she let herself believe him. Their lips met, hesitant at first, then deepening into something fierce, desperate, and undeniable. When they finally broke apart, Alexander whispered against her lips, "Stay. No matter what they say, stay with me." Emily's tears slipped free, and though her fears hadn't vanished, she found herself nodding. "I'll stay." But deep inside, a whisper lingered. For how long before the world tears us apart? Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Until we meet again in the next story, take care and keep the magic of imagination alive.